Hello, I am ZBest. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about the worst tier 10 tank in the game. It is the Rinoceronte, the tier 10 Italian auto reloader heavy tank. My equipment for the replay you're going to see today is improved hardening, improved vertical stabilizer, and improved ventilations. Of course, I was also running food, and I was also running Brothers in Arms on my crew. As you can see, the top speed is not impressive. It was only 40. I decided hit points were more important than top speed, so that's why I went for hardening instead of turbo. 2000 is very low for a heavy tank. The power to weight is very low as well, so this thing is very sluggish. On top of that, the DPM is awful. It's only 2100, and of course, the actual reload, because it's an auto reloader, it can be even slower, unfortunately. So, the shortest reload you can get is 13.92 seconds for 490 alpha, which is forever. Like, the tier 8 German tank destroyer, the Ferdinand, has about like a 9-second reload for 490 alpha. So almost twice as long, and then the reloads only get longer. Of course, if you fire early, then you have to wait a long time, as that's how auto reloaders work. The only good thing is the aim time is very good, and so is the accuracy. Unfortunately, the standard rounds are the only ones with good shell velocity, which it is pretty awesome, 1452 and 268 penetration. However, because of the insanely long reload and because of the fact that it's an auto reloader, you always have to be firing heat, in my opinion, and the shell velocity is half of the APCR at 756. The penetration is okay, 325. It's about the same as the AMX 50B. Of course, there's 10 degrees of gun depression as well, though the turret is not very good. As you can see, if you're running, I think this is versus, it's versus the 268 millimeter penetration APCR, and it's still like a 50-50 on flat ground, which means that with heat shells, you just go through. Of course, these things do absorb a bunch, these kind of spaced armor models, but no hull armor, no turret armor. This weak spot above the gun is also an easy penetration. So, bad gun, bad armor, terrible DPM, terrible shell velocity, and is very slow. So, as you guys can tell, all of that together does not go for a good tank. Anyways, let's get into the replay. So here we are on Westfield. So now we'll follow along with where I'm aiming. As you can see, it's already been almost 18 seconds and I only just got my first shell. Of course, it does have the special mechanic where if you fire early, you do get a percentage of your reload back. That was one very lucky bounce. This thing does not bounce very often. So my gameplay here is not the greatest. Of course, I am at this point in my session, I was at 93.93% on my mark. So, some say you should only fire one shot at a time. I do think that's a viable option if you're going for maximum DPM. Unfortunately, this thing does not trade very well. So, if you have the chance to put 2 shots in and only receive 1, I would always do that and then just hide for the like almost 30 seconds just to get the 2 shells back. The only way you have big games in this thing is if you have very long games, because you do not put out damage very quickly. As I was saying, the gun handling and the accuracy is not bad, but paired with that terrible shell velocity, your shells rarely go where you would like them. And the actual accuracy does not feel as good as the on-paper accuracy. So, like I was saying, I do believe this is the worst tier 10 in the game. Definitely the worst tier 10 heavy, and I would say some might say it's not the worst tier 10 in the game. I would argue otherwise. I know people would call out the 30B, but that thing has amazing DPM and amazing mobility and solid gun depression. Others might call out the Type 5, but with intuition now and the HE buff that it got, the 192 pen, alongside the HE mechanic changes, it's actually not that bad. And of course the IS-4 did also get a buff, so it's not terrible anymore. Of course, now I'm reloading forever for bouncing that shot. Here we see about 4,000 combined, 2,500 damage, 1,500 assistance, and that is the main thing. I do think that with this tank, you can only really achieve any sort of mark of excellence progress or whatever stuff that you do for your team. Assistance is where it comes from. Pure damage is just not the way to go. Of course, you can do damage, but and of course, rarely is a big game without a AFK tank at base. The one nice thing is the artillery definitely does less to this tank than before. This thing was extremely susceptible to artillery fire. Like, anywhere an artillery hit, they did 700 damage, which was awful. So, as you guys can tell, this game does not look anything extraordinary. But in this tank, it just is, because this thing doesn't do very much typically. In 5 minutes, I've done almost 4,500 damage. I don't know if I hit that blind shot. Which, one might say, oh, but you've done that much damage in 5 minutes. How many games are there where you can stay alive for 5 minutes without having to be running because your team has collapsed, or if you're already down because, well, your team just collapsed? Or the other way around, where you're just chasing damage, and this thing is awful at chasing damage. Like, next level garbage at chasing damage, because it's slow, sluggish, and the shell velocity is awful, so sniping is a pain. And on top of that, you just don't have very much DPM. As I said at the beginning, if you guys believe that this is not the worst tier 10 in the game, feel free to leave a comment below. I'll do my best to answer it. I also apologize for being kind of away for so long. I do plan on posting videos more regularly. Unfortunately, I've been extremely busy. I've been working and doing schoolwork, so I do that for about, I want to say, 12 to 15 hours a day, so leaves very little time for tanks. let alone streaming and creating content. There you see the very slow shell velocity. And there you see the awful shells and where the shells like to go when you snapshot. So the reason why I'm sharing this game, of course, it's one of my biggest games in this thing combined. It's closing in on 10k combined, but as we'll see in the post-game stats in just a minute or so. Oh, and this thing's gun elevation is also pretty bad. It's about here I noticed. Oh, I don't actually have my gun up far enough. That's the thing about chasing damage. Basically, if you don't fire early enough, people will just steal your kill. Alright, well, here is the post-game stats. So, of course, this was my 3-mark game, and it was one of my biggest games I had the entire time I played this thing. It was almost 10k combined, 5200 damage, 4300 assist. Damage, I think my best damage in this is only about 7 or 8,000, which of course might be high, but for so many other tanks, that can be done pretty consistently, but that was an exceptionally long game. Of course, I also did bounce some shots, but the bounce from the grill was extremely lucky, and yeah, of course, just a standard tier 10 game. 5, 10 matchmaking, a bunch of tier 9s. Lost a ton of credits because I was firing exclusively heat, because even as bad as that shell is, it is kind of the best option. Here you can see the how bad the gun is. 18, 16, 11. And yeah, so there's a replay of me 3-marking what I think is the worst tier 10 in the game. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave comment if you have any constructive feedback. And yeah, you can join my Discord, link is also below. And I'll also be doing some other wargaming related activities, including casting tonight and tomorrow for the end of Clan Wars season tournament. I will see you guys around.